In the hashtag 100, I am posting on social media 100 Herzl artifacts in 100 days. You can see them at hashtag Herzl100 on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And also they're being posted in blocks of 10 on YouTube. And in this particular video, you will see the countdown from number 49 through to number 40. Enjoy. There are not very many Herzl items that are outside all of the time, but this particular one is. This is a sign for Herzl Park, and it was procured for me by my friend Danny Levinson. Danny was a collector. He was an Indiana Jones of Judaica, rescuing Jewish artifacts from the buildings of New York City, Jewish buildings, as they transitioned to non-Jewish uses. And he arranged for this sign to be made for me. So it is one way that I remember him daily. And the significance of the sign is there are Herzl parks around the world. There is Herzl streets, there's Herzl schools, clubs, organizations. Herzl was so significant for the future, for the history of the Jewish people, that he is recognized in various institutions and various locations. What a legacy for him. His real legacy is the state of Israel, which he envisioned in his book, The Jewish State, which was published in 1896, and he dedicated the rest of his life, sadly only 8 short years, towards the achievement of this goal. He died in 1904 at 44, and 44 years later, in 1948, the state of Israel was proclaimed. So although this is a Herzl park dedicated to Herzl, the state of Israel is an entire country that's dedicated to his vision. What I'm holding is the report of England's Royal Commission that was published in 1903. And the Royal Commission was the Commission on Alien Immigration, which essentially meant the influx of Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe into England. And so this commission had hearings in 1902, and one of the people who was asked to give a deposition was Theodor Herzl. And Herzl spoke English, and he testified to the commission in English. His testimony goes on for a number of pages. He talks about writing the Jewish state as a solution to anti-Semitism, and he answers questions in English. But one particular passage early in his testimony should resonate with everyone today. He talks about what he wrote in The Jewish State, his book. He says, the Jewish question exists, the Jewish question is anti-Semitism, wherever Jews live in perceptible numbers. Where it does not exist, it is carried by Jews in the course of their migration. We naturally move to those places where we are not persecuted, and there our presence produces persecution. This is the case in every country, and will remain so even in those most highly civilized. And this is why Herzl said the answer to anti-Semitism is a Jewish state. As we experience anti-Semitism around the world now, was Herzl correct that it will follow us wherever we go? We go to places where we're free of persecution, and then because there's so many of us or more of us, that causes the persecution, which requires us to move to another place, and the cycle begins again. Herzl was trying to stop that cycle, and his conclusion was the cycle stops when we have a Jewish state. So yes, the Jewish state stopped anti-Semitism for some, is giving rise to anti-Semitism for others. Herzl's solution was not a total answer to the Jewish question of anti-Semitism, but it at least gives the Jewish people a place where we can live and flourish and look after ourselves, try to be safe, and that trying to be safe can be facilitated by finding a way to fulfill Herzl's ultimate dream of Israel living in peace with all of its neighbors and inuring to the benefit of the world. Herzl's testimony in England in 1902 set the ground for what we today need to still try to accomplish. What I'm holding is Harper's Weekly Magazine, the edition of November 26, 1898. And in this edition, there is a complete report written by Stephen Weiss, the prominent American Zionist, about the Second Zionist Congress. Of course, there's a picture of Theodore Herzl. Here's a photograph of the delegates. Herzl's philosophy was that these congresses should be open and transparent. So there was a photographer there. There are no pictures taken inside the First Zionist Congress, but in the Second Zionist Congress and beyond. And there were journalists and writers who talked about it. Here is another photograph of the proceedings in the Congress. And here's a photograph of what they call here the Zionist flag, which became the flag of the State of Israel, pretty close to it. It's a very long article written in tiny print, so I just want to read one final sentence from it. Stephen Weiss writes that surely the world will Godspeed with love and helpfulness the aims of the Jews who, after centuries of exile, turn with longing, aching hearts to Zion. Now, this was a very positive, aspirational, perhaps naive conclusion by Stephen Weiss, but it was written in 1898 when the delegates thought that the state of Israel, what became the state of Israel, the Jewish state, was just around the corner. It took another 50 years from this moment, almost exactly 50 years, for the state of Israel to be created. And of course, there were many friends and allies, including the countries in the UN General Assembly, who on November 29, 1947, voted in the partition resolution to create the state of Israel. But there were also people who didn't like that idea, continue to not like the idea of the Jewish people living safely and freely in our ancestral homeland. So they didn't, with love and helpfulness, assist the Jews in fulfilling these aims. But hopefully things will change. Herzl believes that things can change, things will be better. And ultimately, we hope that the state of Israel, the fulfillment of Herzl's vision, his dream will be completed by peace. What I'm holding, barely, because it's very heavy, is the Theodore Herzl Award, which was given to General Colin Powell by the World Jewish Congress in 2017. Now, I can't think of a better person to have his name attached to an award than Theodore Herzl, because Herzl is a person who imagined a better future for the Jewish people and for all people, basically, in the region. He believed that we're not saddled with the conditions in which we find ourselves today. We can work to make things better. And I dare say that this award is given to someone who spends their life striving to make things better, to defending democracy, to defending humanity, to working towards a better future. So I'm honored to have the Theodore Herzl Award that was given to Colin Powell in my collection, and it is certainly deserving to be part of the hashtag Herzl100. What I'm holding is the greatest example of a Herzl's kosher meat wooden sign ever created. Herzl was not in the meat business. He was not a butcher. He was a lawyer. He was a playwright. He was a journalist. And for the last 8 years of his life, he was a community organizer, organizing the Jewish people behind his plan called Zionism to return the Jewish people to the ancestral homeland in the land of Israel and create a sovereign progressive state there. Although Herzl wasn't kosher, he did have a Jewish identity, of course. He went to Cheder, afternoon school, when he was a child. He had a bar mitzvah. When he had an aliyah, when he was called up to the Torah before the First Zionist Congress in 1897 in Basel, he wrote how moved he was by that. He understood the Jewish religion. In fact, in a letter that he sent inviting delegates to the First Zionist Congress in Basel, he said, in Basel, there are kosher hotels. Now, I don't know anything about the Herzl's kosher meat. Why would it be called Herzl's? Maybe the owner was named Herzl. After Herzl died, many people were named Herzl to keep the dream alive and as a tribute and great admiration for Herzl and his work. So if you know anything about Herzl's kosher meat, please drop me a line. I wonder whether the motto of Herzl's kosher meat was, if you would like to have excellent cuts of meat at a reasonable price, it is no dream. Come to Herzl's. What I am holding is sheet music that is unlike any other in the world. This is Zion album. It was printed by the Hebrew Publishing Company of New York City in the early 1900s. And on the cover, you see Herzl and Max Nordau. The two of them were the leaders of the Zionist organization and the movement in its early days. And the Zion album contains two songs, the Hatikvah, which we talked about in number 67, and a song called Dort wie de Zeder, Where the Cedars Are. And that's a second kind of Zionist anthem which longs for the beauty of the land of Israel, the place where the Maccabees died, the place that's so beautiful that the Jewish people wish to return to. Now, this sheet music, there are many of them. This particular one, there's hundreds, maybe thousands of them. So why is this so special? This particular one has a marking above the Star of David. And that marking says that this is from the ghetto library of Theresienstadt. So somehow this sheet music found its way from New York to Czechoslovakia and was taken to Theresienstadt with other Jews who were rounded up and sent there. And what's amazing about it, if you stop to think about it, that there would have been people who are in Theresienstadt whose life is endangered and living in awful conditions, but still might have gone into the library to get the Hatikvah, the hope, that even in Theresienstadt, people thought about hope, maybe played the music of Hatikvah. Hope had to keep hope. Hope that things would be better, hope that they would get out of that awful situation, and hope that they would fulfill Herzl's dream by going to the land of Israel, which would be a sovereign Jewish state, which in fact was proclaimed into existence on May 14th, 1948. Those people didn't give up hope. We can't give up hope either. What I'm holding is a piece of art made in 2024 by the Israeli artist Sabina Shkolnik Saad. And you will see that it is made of an old Israeli banknote with Herzl's face on it, but it is in the shape of the yellow ribbon. The yellow ribbon was worn for way too long, for 2 years, waiting for the last of the 251 hostages that were taken by Hamas terrorists on October 7th, 2023. This art piece combines the vision of Herzl and, in a sense, the failing of Herzl's vision, in that some 75 years after Israel was created and 126 years after the Zionist dream was first discussed at the First Zionist Congress, Israel still has vicious enemies. Anti-Semitism was not solved as Herzl had hoped, but has morphed into a different form, which is anti-Israel in the most extreme ways. But Herzl also teaches us that whatever the situation is now, it can change. It can be better. And all we have to do is want it and work to make it happen. Wanting it is not sufficient. You can't just wave a magic wand like Tinkerbell and good things will happen. You have to want it, work towards it, compromise where necessary, cooperate, and continue to dream. So that is why this piece, which is both sad and inspirational, is one of the hashtag Herzl 100. What I'm holding is a very rare and beautiful example of a silk Herzl handkerchief. So there's Herzl portrayed in the middle, and this contains New Year's wishes that you should have a good year, a year full of enjoyment and happiness. You should live a long life. So you look at this and wonder, well, why would they portray Herzl on a handkerchief? And who would want to blow their nose into Herzl? But I guess it's all part of the same theme as to why there are so many Herzl artifacts. And the Herzl 100 just scratches the surface of the number of Herzl artifacts there are. And that's because when Herzl died in 1904, it was important to find ways to keep his vision alive. And whether it was on busts or coins or handkerchiefs, just keeping his profile, his vision, his idea out there meant that people continued to work towards it, and also meant in the bleakest of times, in the darkest of times, you could still have hope. Herzl believed tomorrow can be better than today, and you can work towards making it happen. Thankfully, whoever owned this didn't have a terrible cold or sinus infection, because 125 years later, this handkerchief is in great condition. I wish everyone who is watching Herzl 100 great health, long life, and your dreams to be fulfilled the same way that Herzl's was. What I am holding is a very rare penknife that was made in Germany in the 1920s, featuring the likeness of Theodor Herzl and the Star of David. And in fact, I have the advertisement where the knife was introduced. And this was from a publication in New York City in July of 1922. And it says where you can get this penknife: at the Emblem Knife Company on 149 East Broadway, or Resnick, Menschel, and Satz on 46 Canal Street. And the price for the knife was 85 cents. So you may be asking, why would someone bother to make a penknife with Herzl's image on it? And it was really about keeping Herzl's dream alive in the dark days after Herzl died in 1904, until the State of Israel was created in 1948, when it was proclaimed by David Ben-Gurion. The Zionist movement, the Jewish people, had to keep their hope alive. And they did it by putting Herzl's name, likeness, image on all kinds of items. This is a penknife. I have sugar tongs. I have a spoon, a fork, all kinds of things, just to keep the dream alive. And the dream was kept alive, and it was realized when the State of Israel was proclaimed on May 14th, 1948. Now, Herzl believed that the State of Israel should ultimately, when it's created, be a benefit to the Jewish people, of course, be a benefit to the neighbors, be a benefit to the entire world. And so that work is still ongoing. And this little penknife from 100 plus years ago just reminds us how important his dream was then, and it continues to be. What I'm holding is the head and the hat of Theo, the Herzl mascot. Theo was made by Street Characters Inc. in 2015. It's a company in Calgary that makes mascots for NFL teams, U.S. college sports teams. And Theo has been across North America. He was in New York multiple times. He was in the Celebrate Israel parade on the float of the American Zionist movement. He was at a Mets game on Jewish Heritage Day. That was at the time when the Mets had a Jewish Heritage Day. And he was also in Times Square to meet his fellow mascots. And Iron Man went up to Theo and said, "That's a good suit." So you may be asking, what is the purpose of Theo? And the purpose of Theo is for people to go up to the mascot and say, "Who is this?" And the answer would be, it's Herzl. And then, who's Herzl? And then you can tell the story of Herzl, similar to the stories you've been hearing in the first 60 episodes of the hashtag Herzl100. So I'd ask you to join me in helping to tell Herzl's story. There have been 60 episodes. If there's ones that you particularly like, please share them. Please tell your friends about the Herzl100 and join Theo and me in spreading Herzl's message.